good schools, safe cities, and a thriving economy. So please give a warm welcome to my friend, the governor of Florida, Jeb Bush.
I am blushing, buddy. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. So Eric said he's gonna, I had to listen to his introduction because he wanted to make me blush. I think I got a little blush, so that was very kind. It's great to be with you all. I love the premise of this, the conversation we're supposed to have today. We're supposed to talk about what the world looks like if you're elected President of the United States. Our campaigns so far have been a lot about the differences between us, and that's fine. That's what politics is about. But I think we also need to be thinking about what the world could look like if we apply conservative principles the right way to assure that children and grandchildren have more opportunities than we have. 5 million more people are in poverty today than the day that Barack Obama got elected President of the United States. In the middle of this country, the great middle that defines us, hadn't gotten a raise in a long, long while. It seems to me this election needs to be about how do we rise up again? How do we restore America's presence in the world? And how do we create an America where people can pursue their dreams as they see fit? Where we reject the welfare state and move back to an opportunity society where people have the capacity to achieve earned success. So I'm going to try to stay true to the premise of the conversation, and I appreciate Eric's structuring these speeches this way. The first thing the next president has to do is change the culture in Washington, D.C. We have to shrink the government workforce. Look, if you start with the premise that you want to make government smaller and more effective, then we need to make sure that the size of government itself begins to shrink. In Florida, when I was governor, we reduced the state government workforce by 13,000 people, 11%. We could do the exact same thing in relatively short order in Washington, D.C., because no one's even tried it in a long, long while. Simply by saying for 3 people that leave, most of them will be leaving by attrition, you replace it with 1, you get pretty close to 10% in a 4-year period. If you limit the number of contractors so that you're not just replacing a government worker with a contractor, like an Edward Snowden type person, if you shrink that as well, you begin to change the culture in Washington, D.C. Secondly, we need lobbying reform. It is incredible the amount of the number of lobbyists that exist today. First, I think that every meeting that a lobbyist has with a top staff official in Congress or in the White House, and certainly among elected officials, should be online within 24 hours. There should be a 6-year ban for elected officials once they finish their public service. If it is about public service, I think you'll appreciate why the ban should exist. If it's about public service, there should be a 6-year ban on making them have the revolving door to be lobbying their former colleagues. Those kinds of things begins to change the culture in Washington. And frankly, this apparently is controversial, but this is pretty commonplace in state legislatures across the country. If you don't show up to work as a member of Congress, you should not get paid. The second mission, if I'm elected president, is to change the conversation about this so-called new normal. You've heard it, I think. The new normal about economic growth. That our country can't grow the way it used to. Get over it. It's over. It's not possible to grow at 4%. We have to accept 2% of economic growth, that somehow that's the new normal. You know, the science has decided, this kind of language now that's used, it doesn't allow for healthy debate. The simple fact is we can grow at 4%, but it's going to require fixing some really big, complex things. And if we do that, I promise you that people will be lifted out of poverty. And I promise you the middle class will get a raise for the first time in 15 years. This should be a lofty aspirational goal, but it is realistic to be able to do this. And the 3 things I want to talk to you about today, there are others as well that we need to do for sure, but the 3 I'd like to talk about relate to regulation, relate to taxation, and relate to embracing the energy revolution in our midst rather than trying to push it down. As it relates to regulation, it is stifling the ability for people to rise up. There are fewer businesses being started today than going out of business. Never happened in American history. We sit back and accept this? Of course we shouldn't. The reason why people aren't starting businesses is to start business as a non-incumbent costs an extraordinary amount of money. The confusion, the uncertainty, and the cost of regulation today is stifling the next generation of job creators. And we need to reverse that as fast as we can, and as president, I pledge to do just that. Regulatory costs at the national level, according to some estimates, is $2 trillion of additional burdens. That's why it's hard for us to start up businesses. So what should we do? First, you appoint men and women that have subject matter expertise in the whole alphabet soup of government. I know that sounds like a really radical idea, that someone has some experience in the field that they're regulating. Today, in the age of Obama, basically you have to be a political hack or an academic. And the net result is you have a very partisan, progressive liberal agenda being thrust on us that is really stifling the ability for our country to be dynamic. So put good men and women in that have a balanced view of the public objective and the economic impacts. Secondly, I will undo by executive order what's been done by executive order wherever possible. Third, we should shift as much power back to the states. When I just saw someone sent, Boston Globe did a story about an 11-page letter I wrote the previous president on his first month of office as a new governor of the state of Florida. 11 pages of suggestions of how to do exactly that. 9/11 kind of stopped that progress in place. It needs to be the highest priority of the next president, because I know for a fact, as governor of a state, a complicated state, you can build roads better, you can educate better, you can have the DEP, in my case, do their environmental issues better, doing water quality, air quality. All those things could be done much better at the state level and local level than in Washington, D.C. If you want to shrink regulation in Washington, shift the power back. One of my first objectives as President of the United States would be to pass the REINS Act. I don't know if you heard about it. This is where a rule is proposed, and if it costs more than $100 million, it has to go back to Congress, the elected officials, to be able to decide whether it's meritorious or not. Allowing unregulated bureaucrats to regulate us is not the right thing to do. We need to pull back that authority and make sure that our public elected officials are there. If we did that alone, it would release the animal spirits of our country, and we'd begin to see higher sustained economic growth. But we also need to recognize we have the most convoluted tax code in the world. It is stifling the ability of people to dream dreams anymore. For the incumbents, it's fine. You know, it's fine. Just if you ever fly to Dulles to go to the nation's capital, building after building after building of consultants, of accountants, of lobbyists, of lawyers, of defense contractors. They're doing great. The more complicated the world is, the more complicated the tax code is, the harder it is for the next generation of achievers to make ends meet. But the incumbents do quite well. We need to simplify the tax code, lower the rates as much as possible. You shouldn't have to get a lobbyist or get in line to be able to get your tax credit or your tax deduction. It shouldn't work that way. And if we're going to grow at 4%, we have to make a radical change, dramatically changing the tax code and letting people decide how they want to pursue their dreams, not getting in line and getting their snouts at the closer end of the trough, but be able to say, I got a great idea. And I know the rules as it relates to regulation, and I know what the tax rate's going to be. Let me go do it unencumbered by having to get in line in Washington, D.C. So tax reform is part of this. 2,000 pages of laws have created 9,000 pages of rules that is stifling this great dynamic country from doing what I know it will do. The third thing I would suggest to you is we need to be all in the energy revolution. This should be a time when we have marching bands in this country celebrating the combination of things that are so uniquely American. Private property rights, creating a dynamic subsurface trading that allows for costs to go up and down based on demand. Entrepreneurs, private businesses in pursuit of better and better lower costs. George Mitchell, an immigrant, through trial and error took two existing technologies, horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, and created a revolution. This administration, and if Hillary Clinton's elected, what she'll do is try to stifle this because of some hard-edged political agenda. The simple fact is, this is the path to high, sustained economic growth, high wages, lower costs, lower utility bills, lower gasoline prices, reindustrializing the country, allowing us to use our energy to export so that the Russians don't hold Europe hostage in terms of natural gas. This is a place we should be celebrating and protecting it rather than pushing it down, which Hillary Clinton would do. And by the way, after all the years of studying the XL pipeline, the Department of State's supposed to be in charge of this, which seems kind of weird too. I'm not sure how they got in the pipeline permitting business, but they did. XL pipeline, it's taken 2 or 3 years. She can't now have an opinion on that. Really? I know what her opinion is. She's opposed to it. I'm for it. We should be for creating a North American energy strategy to allow us to be with the lowest cost energy in the world. If we do that, those 3 things, we're on the path to high sustained economic growth. And I promise you, if that happens, this notion that people believe their children and grandchildren will have less opportunities than they have will go away. We'll begin to embrace the unforeseen and the unknown, the dynamic side of life that is much more exciting than getting in line and feeling like the end is near. Conservatives will win if we're hopeful and optimistic and we have concrete plans based on our timeless principles to allow us to convince others that right now have lost hope. People are struggling today. We can't tell them how bad it is over and over again. We have to give them a sense that if you let us come in and work as a team and solve problems, that your spirits could be lifted up because your life will get better. Not based on some kind of idyllic notion, but your life will be better because we've done it before. I did it as governor, and we've had great presidents in the past that have lifted our spirits with concrete proposals to do just that. The other thing that's important, we're never going to grow at 4% per year as far as the eye can see, which should be our aspiration as a nation, unless we restore America's presence in the world. This president and his Secretary of State has created chaos, both Secretary of States, the previous one and this one. They're negotiating with our enemies, unilaterally disarming, if you will, never getting any concessions in advance, and they're pushing away our friends. It's like Alice in Wonderland foreign policy. It's all backwards. It's all upside down. Our friends should know that we have their back, and our enemies should fear us. So think about it. This is the world we're in. The minute someone like myself says this, I'm a warmonger. Hillary Clinton's campaign has already tweeted it out. On the live streaming, they picked it up. They tweeted out, Bush is a warmonger. Really? Well, let's think back in American history when we've had peace through strength. What's happened? We've created a more secure world for ourselves and a more peaceful world for the world. When we pull back, what happens? Look back at the time of Jimmy Carter. Look at what we're doing right now. Our enemies, when they don't fear us, act aggressively. And that's what's happening. The Chinese are building a military base 100 miles into the South China Sea. The Russians are moving forward with impunity because they know the United States is weak. ISIS is a caliphate created when Hillary Clinton left as Secretary of State, when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama left Iraq, creating a void that now is a caliphate the size of Indiana, organized to destroy Western civilization. These are serious times. It does not require for us to say we're going to declare a war on this country or that country. It simply means that we have to begin to lead again. American leadership is essential for a more peaceful world, and we need to rebuild the military to back it up. Look, the final thing I'll say is leadership matters. It just matters. It matters a lot. It's not all about talking. It's not all about who can deliver a great speech. In fact, I can promise you this, if it's about delivering great speeches, I'm not going to be president probably. I can do it okay. I don't have a self-esteem problem here, don't get me wrong. But you've got to lead. We can't just keep electing people that do give great speeches. 2008 is living proof of that, isn't it? Soaring eloquence to fool people and then to carry out a progressive liberal agenda will doom this country. We have to have leaders that say what they're going to do and then do what they said they were going to do. You have to have knowledge that person has experience in having done it before. You have to know that a leader has a spine and a backbone. We saw this debate a couple of days ago, which was a lot of fun, and there were a lot of tough questions. And there's a candidate and a couple of candidates complaining that the questions were too tough. Well, you think that's tough. How about dealing with Putin? How about dealing with the challenges that exist in our country? This is nothing. You have to have leaders that are principled, that are courageous, that are servant-oriented rather than it's all about them. The big personalities on the stage matter nothing for a person that's stuck in poverty. They matter nothing for someone who's scared about the security of this country. They matter nothing at all for people that are stuck in the middle. We need leaders to be able to fix these big things, and when we do, this country will take off. And we need to be united, because Hillary Clinton is going to be Barack Obama's third term on foreign policy and third term on economic policy, and it will change this country. I, for one, don't want that to happen. And so my pledge to you is I'm going to fight hard. I'm going to fight with heart. I'm going to do this in a hopeful, optimistic way. I'm going to do my best not to tear down my opponents because I admire most of them, and I respect them all. I respect them all. And I know the only way you can win in I wasn't a calculus guy, but here's my math. The only way you can get to 50 to fix these things and restore America's greatness is to win, not to subtract. It's to add. It's to take what we have and build on it and go campaign in places where a conservative hasn't been in a long, long way. I'm going to go campaign in the Latino communities in Spanish and in English, and I'm going to say, join our cause. I'm going to go campaign in the black churches and say, I'm on the side of your children. We need to change and challenge these corrupt education systems that are keeping your children down. I'm for school choice across the board. Join us in our cause to liberate our education system. I'm going to go campaign on college campuses and say, how's this been working out for you for the last 6 years? Obamacare, you're needed to be healthy and young. You must be in the system so that guys my age, can get a better deal. How's that student loan thing working out for you? Recourse debt on your back where you can't even graduate because there's no reform of our higher education system. How's it working out where there's no jobs available for the degree that you might have gotten? I think we can win this in a principled way, but we're going to have to campaign not like this. We're going to have to campaign like this. Come our way, join our cause, fight for your own freedom. And if we do that, this is the most extraordinary time to be alive in this world. We're living in a time of incredible abundance. It's just not reaching all the people of this extraordinary country. We tear down these barriers, we restore America's greatness, and we will be able to say, because all of you are involved in the political system, we were part of something bigger than ourselves to change the course of our country to assure that the next generation has more opportunities than what we had. That should be our mission. I humbly ask for your support. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Really appreciate the invite. Thank you.
My microphones have been failing me today. So, okay, I get to ask the first question. Here's the stack. So, let me put you on the spot a little bit on this question. What sets you apart as a governor who last held office in 2007 from the current governors who are running for office?
Well, I think it's the comprehensive nature of my reforms. And if you don't mind, I'll toot my horn here a little bit. everything that I said in terms of cutting taxes, eliminating affirmative action. Has anybody done that? No.
Don't put me on the
Replacing
spot, I put you on the
replacing it
spot.
with a model that actually allowed for more African Americans and Hispanics to attend our universities, and big procurement gains, eliminating set-asides and the things that were discriminatory, and replacing it with a leadership model actually works a lot better. We eliminated career civil service protections. You can fire people at will if they're incompetent. You could pay people more if they were doing a good job. We reduced the state government workforce by 13,000. We created the first statewide voucher program in the country. We created the second statewide voucher program in the country. We created the largest virtual school in the country by far. We created, I think, the third largest voucher program in the country. We reformed our education system, had the greatest learning gains. We led the nation in job growth 7 out of my 8 years. We had more small businesses created during my 8 years than any state. We were one of 2 states to go to AAA bond rating. When I left, there were $9 billion of reserves compared to $1 billion when we started. I vetoed 2,500 separate line items in the budget. They called me Vito Corleone because of that. I'm not saying other people's records are bad. I'm just saying if people look at this, I think they would say this is the most comprehensive record of consistent conservative principles applied in a state, a purple state, that helped people rise up. People were a lot better off in my 8th year than they were on the day that I started. And I think that's the way to win. And by the way, I won in a purple state with 500,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. I got 60% of the Hispanic vote. I won re-election in this turbulent time. There's a lot of tire marks on my forehead, Eric, doing this. Makes it sound like it's simple to do this. Everybody fought this. The teachers union mortgaged their building and then financed my opponent's operation when I ran for re-election. The trial bar hated me. The bureaucrats hated me. People didn't like me at all. This was not a happy time. Thank you. So it's a record of accomplishment that I think is pretty significant. And I won. I didn't talk about it, which is really good to talk about things, to heighten awareness of these things. I got to say what I was going to do, and then I did it.
I'm happy to loan you some of the tire marks from Donald Trump's campaign today. Pat from Sharpsburg, Georgia. Governor Bush, how can we prevent the implementation of the recent rules from the Obama administration regarding their new affordable housing regulations?
Well, if any of these rules are in process, they can be stopped by the next president. And that's what in my comments I made reference to this. If it's an executive order that's beginning the process of official rulemaking, until that is complete, all of those can be reversed. And that would be the first order of business for my presidency and hopefully for any Republican's presidency. And that's how you would do it. If it's done, if the rule goes through the administrative process and is complete, then you have to start the administrative process over. Here's what I won't do. And there's a temptation now to do this. I'm not speaking about anybody in particular, but I think there's a temptation to say, well, Obama did it, so we can do it. Obama tramples over the Constitution with executive orders that he doesn't have the legal authority to make, so we should do it. I'm not going to do that. The Constitution is a document that we should respect.
I've got a number of these questions, and I think probably the best phrased one is Ed from Sacramento. Wants to know, Governor Bush, we're
Help's
apprehensive.
on the way, Ed. I know you're behind enemy lines in Sacramento, but
We're apprehensive based on what we've either heard you say or heard other people say about your positions on illegal immigration in the country. What can you do to make us feel comfortable?
Well, first of all, read my book that was published 4 years ago. I'm saying the same things now. Immigration Wars, you can get it on Amazon for like 99 cents, I'm afraid. It's not a bestseller. It's not like one of Eric's books. So his is the bestseller, mine's not. So this last week, we unveiled kind of elements of the book, a comprehensive plan on how to deal with this. And if you talk to border governors, they'll tell you it's inappropriate to have Border Patrol officers, the majority of which 40 miles off the border. Makes no sense. You forward lean. You create camps in essence. You create bases. You create a strategy, and where the movement of people across the border surges towards, in some place that doesn't exist now, you move there. And you use technology. And you use fencing wherever appropriate. Most of the time that's in urban areas. You create a comprehensive strategy, you measure it, you go at it. This is what people in business do. This is what governors do. This is what I've had a lifetime of experience doing. Secondly, you got to use technologies to deal with the 40% of illegal immigrants that come with a legal visa. They don't come across our border. They come in our airports, and the exit and entrance visa system needs to be upgraded like most countries have, and you need to have more Border Patrol or ICE officials in communities to be able to identify where they are and to politely ask them to leave. We need an e-verify system that's verifiable, but businesses shouldn't be penalized for a system that isn't complete, but a great country ought to be able to figure this out. I mean, have we lost our way so much that we now assume the new normal is healthcare.gov, that rollout? I mean, think about it. Every aspect of our life, these things happen all the time. We can apply technology to deal with this issue. We ought to take away all federal law enforcement money to sanctuary cities that are violating the law. So this is not the most complex thing that we have to deal with. This is not it. This is the first step. And if you gain people's confidence that we do that, then I think we could realize that legal immigration, needs to be reformed as well. Most of our legal immigrants come through a quota system by country and by family petitioning. Most people don't know this, but it was done in the 1960s, and we have what's called chain migration. So we have the broadest definition of family in the world: spouse and minor children, like every country, right? And then adult siblings and adult parents. If we narrowed that to what every other country has, it would be 500,000 people less that you could then imagine having 500,000 people that you picked who could come in. That would be a catalyst for higher sustained economic growth, because you'd have the entrepreneurs, the scientists, the people that are graduating with PhDs after we train them and subsidize it in some ways. Then we say, go back to your country and compete against us. That's not the kind of create a guest worker program to deal with jobs that no one else will do. These are the kinds of things that will help us grow, but we've got to first control the border, narrow family petitioning, and this country would be benefiting, as we always have, generation after generation. For the 11 million, we might as well bring that one up too, right? Okay, thanks. The 11 million people, there's two things you can do. Nothing. I mean, that's a plan, I guess. Or you could say, let's deal with the 11 million people here where they earn legal status. They don't earn citizenship, they earn legal status, where they pay a fine, where they work, they have a provisional work permit, they don't receive federal government money, they learn English, they pay taxes, and over an extended period of time, they earn legal status. The option of deportation, according to the American Action Network, a conservative think tank, is $400 to $600 billion over 20 years, and it'll disrupt community life. I, for one, think the plan I just laid out is a better plan than a $400 to $600 billion cost plan or keeping people in the shadows. I, for one, believe that. And I'm going to stand on that and believe on it. And if people don't like it, that's fine.
We don't have a lot of time left, but there are a number of questions on this, and I awkwardly am going to have to ask my wife's question so I don't get in trouble at home. I'm already in trouble with Donald Trump. I can't be in trouble with my wife.
Hey, tell you what.
Yeah.
Tell you what, my friend. You're on the side of women. I'll take your side of that bet.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I mean, let me. Come on. Give me a break. I mean, do we want to win? Do we want to insult 53% of all voters? What Donald Trump said is wrong. That is not how we win elections, and worse yet, that is not how you bring people together to solve problems. That is not the way to do it. So your decision, I think, was the right one. Mr. Trump ought to apologize.
Thank you. Okay, so you and I have talked about this before. My wife is college educated. We have a daughter who's now going into 4th grade. We appreciate your dedication to education standards, but she can't help our 3rd grader with her math homework because of the Common Core material. And so Look, I know you and I have had the conversation on Common Core, but if you could just explain for the crowd here your view on standards, whether it's Common Core or not.
Standards need to be high. That's what I believe. They need to be higher. In most states, they're so low that if students, by the time we spend more per student than any country in the world, that's where we are, other than Belgium and Luxembourg, I think, we spend more per student, we end up with dismal results because we've dumbed down curriculum and we have low expectations in the form of standards. And the net result is about a third of our kids, maybe 40% at best, are truly college ready, and very few are career ready. The idea that you could graduate from high school and begin your journey with a job is not really relevant anymore in America, because the skills required for meaningful jobs are far higher than a high school degree, and the training, career orientation of education has diminished as well. That is a huge challenge. Standards by themselves won't yield the result we need, which is a dramatically higher number of kids being college or career ready. But it's the first step. We need more school choice. I think we need to eliminate social promotion. These are all state issues, by the way, not a federal government issue. The only place the federal government could play a role in this is to say there are three big funding sources the federal government gives. If Florida, which has a learning disabled voucher program, it's called the McKay Scholarships. If anybody here have a loved one that has a learning disability, there's like 500,000 in Florida. It's a big deal. If the federal law says that if you have an IEP, an individualized education plan, if you don't think in Florida that plan's working for you, you can take the state and local dollars and go to a private school. What would happen if we took the federal monies that are supposed to go to IDEA, this program for learning disabilities, and said you could add that to the voucher? You would dramatically expand private options for parents that are trapped in failing schools. Same with Title I for kids in poverty, and same with early childhood education. States ought to be able to have the ability, if they're willing to reform, they ought to have the ability to access this money rather than having the federal government fund the beast. So I'm for higher standards with real accountability and real school choice. It ought to be state-driven, locally administered. The federal government should have nothing to do with it, because I know for a fact, I went to visit, Eric, when I ran the first time, 250 schools. I'll never forget, I'm sitting in this is 1998. And trust me, this is still the exact same problem we have today in American education. This is not, we haven't overcome this at all. I'm sitting in this lab, remedial lab. A kid is trying to pass an 8th grade level high school test in 1998. I'm running for governor. The question was, a baseball game starts at 3, it ends at 4:30, how long's the game? He couldn't answer it. Now, you think about the thousands and thousands of kids. If we dumb things down and don't expect them to do what we want them, what we believe they can do, if we keep dumbing it down, your kid's going to be great, because his teacher, she's never going to let him down. But what about these
sharp?
Yeah. But what about the failed public schools all across this country? We're casting aside kids. If we expect that kind of expectation and there's no consequence for kids like that, trust me, that's not a problem just for him and his family. That's a problem for all of us. And I will not allow that to happen. I will fight on behalf of kids in poverty, kids that are struggling. We should not let them cast them away, because we're going to have Fergusons and Baltimores and other things like that. And this should break our heart, but it also should give us a conscience that as Americans, we should never let this happen. That's why I'm passionate about this stuff, and that's why I'm for high standards.
Governor Bush, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Governor Jeb Bush.